timeline animation within Create. At the bottom here I have my timeline window, that's on a tab down here. And I have a green box here. If I right click on it, I can change to show hours, minutes, seconds and frames, minutes, seconds and frames, seconds and frames, or frames. So let's show minutes, seconds and frames for the moment. With Pixel Power, we automatically assume that the timeline is 24 hours long and you're just going to use the part you want to use. So here's my box. I can move it and place it wherever I want to by using the axis or just picking up the object. I can also move it by changing the numbers here in position. So I want to animate the position. If I click on this clock, wherever my playhead is on this timeline, that will add a keyframe. And that's grabbed a snapshot of the X, Y and the Z values. And you'll see it's also opened up a base position. Now the base position is used when using plugins or using scripting, where you might want to get back to its original position. So let's put a keyframe in at 15 frames. I'm just going to drag that keyframe back to frame 0. When the playhead is above this keyframe, and you see this little plus here for the keyframe, and I hit the plus, it actually has separate X, Y and Z values. Because I'm moving as a whole object, I can hide the X, Y and Z, and I can set X, Y and Z all at the same time. When I'm at frame 0, we are actively above an active keyframe, and that would allow me to modify it. If I go down to say frame 25, my axes are greyed out. I can't move the object and I can't move my numbers down here. To make life easy, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on auto keyframe, and now the axes are lit up. The moment I start to move my object, a keyframe will be inserted and then it will be modified to the value of where I leave my object. I'm now going to go along to frame 50. Auto keyframe is still red and highlighted, so I can now move up to here and add a third keyframe. When auto keyframe is highlighted, I can go anywhere on the timeline and I can add extra keyframes if I wish. If I wish to animate the rotation now as well, I go back to my properties of my box and I activate rotation, add my first keyframe where my playhead is. Then I might want the rotation to stop there, so I can either use the rotate tool here, rotate it, or I can come down here and I can use the numbers to set my rotation value. So now we have 2 keyframes for rotation and we have 4 keyframes for position. These are separate, so I can actually move my keyframes around. If I left click with the mouse and drag my mouse over like this, I can select the 2 rotation keyframes and move those up and down the timeline. I can do the same by lassoing 3 keyframes here. I can also use the control key on my keyboard and just click 2 keyframes. And I can move these 2 keyframes, leaving the other keyframes in place. Last but not least, if I click outside of the timeline, I can see my active animation here. I can stretch out my whole active animation and slow it down, or I can speed it up by compressing it. And each of the keyframes is stretched proportionally in time. If I just grab these 2 keyframes though, then that will just move these 2 keyframes later. If I click outside, you can now see I have a longer timeline, but all I've adjusted is the position. Let's move the rotation to later. Moving along the timeline, at the moment I am seeing 100 frames, but my animation is over 75 frames. If I right click in the number area, I can zoom to fit 3D. There's a keyboard shortcut for this, Shift and Home. And what that will do is it will put this active part of the animation and let it fill this whole window. So let's do that now. Let's right click, zoom to fit page 3D. And now you can see my window is 75 frames long. If I hold my control key down and then left click, it gives me a grab hand, which allows me to move the timeline up and down within the window. So I'm holding the control key down and left clicking on my mouse. If I hold the shift key down and then left click on my mouse, then I can zoom in or zoom out by moving my mouse from left to right. So I can now return to frame 0 if my playhead is there. I can show current time, which pops that in the middle. Right click, return to frame 0, goes back to frame 0. And don't forget we can zoom to fit 3D, which will set the whole active timeline within our window.